The Forbidden Touch. Jake Chen wiped his sweaty hands on his diplomatic uniform as he stared out the spaceship window. The alien planet Zrix grew larger, its purple clouds swirling around towers that reached into the sky. This was humanity's first diplomatic mission to the Zrix homeworld, and he couldn't mess it up. "Remember," Captain Sarah Evans said, "the Zrix Queen agreed to meet us only because our scans showed we might be compatible trading partners. Don't do anything to upset them." Jake nodded, his throat dry. The landing pad came into view, a massive crystal platform floating above the city. Hundreds of tall, elegant aliens waited below, their silver skin gleaming in the pink sunlight. Their long necks and flowing robes made them look like living statues. A ship landed with a soft hum. Jake straightened his jacket one last time and walked to the exit. The door opened with a hiss of air, and he stepped out into the alien world. A group of Zrix guards approached, their metallic armor clicking as they walked. They carried strange weapons that pulsed with blue light. Behind them came the most beautiful creature Jake had ever seen. Queen Sierra of the Zrix stood nearly 8 feet tall. Her silver skin had a pearl-like shine, and her eyes were deep purple with star-like points of light. Unlike the other Zrix, who wore plain robes, she was dressed in flowing crystals that chimed softly as she moved. "Welcome, human Jake Chen," she said in perfect English. Her voice was like music. "We hope this meeting will bring friendship between our peoples." Jake bowed deeply, just as he had practiced. "Thank you for this honor, Your Majesty. Earth looks forward to peaceful relations with the Zrix." Everything was going perfectly. Then Jake made the biggest mistake of his life. As he stood up from his bow, he lost his balance. He reached out to steady himself, and his hand brushed against Queen Sierra's exposed arm. The world seemed to freeze. The guards raised their weapons with shocking speed. The crowd gasped. Several Zrix covered their eyes, as if they couldn't bear to watch what would happen next. But something strange occurred. Where Jake's fingers had touched the Queen's arm, her silver skin began to glow with a soft blue light. Queen Sierra's eyes went wide, and she stared at the glowing spot with an expression Jake couldn't read. "Seize him," shouted one of the royal advisors, a tall Zrix with elaborate face markings. "He has committed the highest crime." The guards moved forward, their weapons humming dangerously. Jake stepped back, raising his hands. "I'm sorry. It was an accident." "Wait." Queen Sierra's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Everyone stopped moving. "This human's crime requires special consideration. Take him to the diplomatic quarters. I will decide his punishment personally." The guards grabbed Jake's arms and led him away. As they marched him through crystal corridors, he heard whispers from the Zrix they passed. He touched the Queen. "No one has touched royal skin in 1,000 years. He'll be executed for sure." Hours later, Jake paced in his room, wondering if these would be his last moments alive. Suddenly, the door slid open. Queen Sierra stepped in, alone. Jake fell to his knees. "Your Majesty, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." "Be quiet, human," she said, but her voice wasn't angry. It was curious. She moved closer, towering over him. "Do you know what you did today? I touched you, which is forbidden, I now understand. No one has touched Zrix royalty in generations. It is our most sacred law." She paused, looking at her arm where he had touched her. The skin still had a faint glow. "But you made me feel something." Jake looked up, confused. "Feel something?" Queen Sierra knelt down, bringing her face close to his. Her star-filled eyes studied him intensely. "Our species lost the ability to feel physical sensation long ago. But when you touched me," she reached out, her hand stopping just inches from his face. "I felt warmth, for the first time in my life." She stood up suddenly, her crystal dress chiming. "Touch me again, human, and you'll suffer consequences beyond imagination." She moved to the door, then looked back with an expression that made Jake's heart skip. But perhaps that suffering would be worth it. The door closed behind her, leaving Jake alone with 1,000 questions. Outside his window, the pink sun set over the alien city, and he wondered what strange game of politics and passion he had just stumbled into. Royal Secrets. The secret archives of the Zrick's royal palace lay deep underground, where crystal walls pulsed with dim purple light. Jake Chen shouldn't have been there. But when a mysterious message appeared on his room's computer screen with directions to the archives, he had to know why. His footsteps echoed as he crept through the empty halls. The message had promised answers about why touching the queen had made her skin glow. After 3 sleepless nights wondering if he would be executed, Jake needed those answers. He rounded a corner and froze. Princess Vera, Queen Sierra's younger sister, stood in front of a glowing archive terminal. Her silver skin seemed to absorb the purple light, making her look like a living shadow. "I wondered if you would come, human," she said without turning around. "You're either very brave or very foolish." Jake started to back away, but Princess Vera raised her hand. "Stay. I'm the one who called you here." She turned, her face markings glowing faintly. "I need to show you something about my sister." She pressed her hand to the terminal. A hologram appeared, showing ancient Zrick's text and medical diagrams. 1,000 years ago, she explained, our people could feel everything. Touch, pain, pleasure. Then something changed in the royal bloodline. The hologram shifted to show a family tree. Generation by generation, the ability to feel physical sensation disappeared. First in the royal family, then in the noble houses. Now, none of us can feel anything. Her purple eyes fixed on Jake. "Except when my sister touched you." Jake's mind raced. But why keep it a secret, if your people lost something so important? Politics. Princess Vera's voice turned bitter. The royal family claimed it was a blessing from the gods. They said losing physical sensation meant we could rule with pure logic, without being clouded by physical desires. She laughed darkly. Really, they were just afraid to admit something was wrong. A noise from the corridor made them both jump. Princess Vera quickly shut down the terminal. "The guards are coming. But before you go, know this. My sister has been meeting in secret with the royal doctor. She's trying to understand what your touch did to her." Jake's heart pounded. "Why are you telling me this?" Princess Vera moved close, her silver face inches from his. "Because I saw how she looked at you after you touched her. I saw the glow in her skin. And I think—" She paused, looking around nervously. "I think you might be the key to saving our species." The guard patrol's footsteps grew closer. Princess Vera pushed Jake toward a hidden door. "Go. And remember, some in the palace would kill to keep these secrets buried. Watch your back, human." Jake slipped through the door just as the guards rounded the corner. He hurried back to his quarters, his mind spinning with questions. But one thing was clear. He was caught in something much bigger than a diplomatic incident. Back in his room, Jake found a new message waiting on his computer. His hands shook as he read it. "Meet me in the Crystal Garden at midnight. Come alone. X. The Queen's personal sign." Jake looked out his window at the garden below, where crystal flowers caught the starlight like frozen flames. In a few hours, he would either get answers or walk into a trap. As he watched, a hooded figure moved through the garden, touching the crystal flowers. Each one the figure touched turned from clear to deep blue, leaving a trail of colored crystals. The same blue that had appeared in Queen Sierra's skin when Jake touched her. A second figure followed behind the first, watching from the shadows. Princess Vera's warning echoed in Jake's mind. Some would kill to keep these secrets. The pink sun began to set, casting long shadows through the crystal towers. In a few hours, Jake would meet the Queen. But now he understood. This wasn't just about him and her anymore. He held the key to changing an entire civilization. He just had to survive long enough to use it. Dangerous games. The Crystal Garden looked different at midnight. The twin moons of Zrick's cast rainbow shadows through the crystal flowers, creating dancing patterns on the ground. Jake Chen touched one of the blue crystals the queen had transformed earlier. It felt warm, almost alive. "Beautiful, aren't they?" Queen Shara's voice came from behind him. She wore a simple robe instead of her royal crystals, making her look more like a ghost than a queen. "They respond to emotion now. They never did before." Jake turned to face her. "Like how your skin responded to my touch." "Exactly." She moved closer, her silver skin reflecting the moonlight. "The royal doctor has a theory. He thinks humans have something we lost. A kind of energy that awakens sensation." She held up her arm, showing the spot where Jake had touched her. It still had a faint blue glow. "But that's not why I called you here." A crystal flower nearby suddenly turned red. Jake spun around to see 5 royal guards emerging from hidden doors in the garden walls. But these weren't normal guards. Their armor was black instead of silver, and they moved without making a sound. "My sister's spies," Chiara explained quietly. "They've been watching us both. We need to give them a show." Before Jake could ask what she meant, Chiara grabbed his shoulders and shoved him hard. He stumbled backward. "How dare you suggest such a thing to your queen?" she shouted, her voice echoing through the garden. "You forget your place, human." Jake's heart raced as he understood the game. They had to pretend to be enemies. "I meant no disrespect, Your Majesty. I only wanted to understand." Silence. She raised her hand as if to strike him, but her fingers brushed his cheek instead. Where they touched, both her skin and his began to glow blue. The crystal flowers around them shifted colors rapidly. Blue, purple, gold. The black armored guards moved closer, weapons ready. Sierra turned to them. "Leave us. This human needs a proper lesson in respect." The guards hesitated, then melted back into the shadows. As soon as they were gone, Sierra's fierce expression softened. "They'll report to my sister that I threatened you. It should keep you safe for now." She touched another crystal flower, watching it change color. "But we have a bigger problem." She waved her hand, and a hologram appeared in the air between them. It showed a massive chamber deep beneath the palace, filled with thousands of glowing pods. "These are our children," she said softly. "Every Zrix child is grown in these pods because natural birth became impossible when we lost sensation." Jake stared at the pods. "All of them." "Yes, but something's wrong. Each generation, fewer pods succeed. Soon, we may not be able to create new life at all." She looked at him intently. "Unless we find a way to restore what we lost." A sound from above made them both look up. A drone disguised as a bird circled the garden. Tahira quickly waved away the hologram. "We're being watched again." But first, she reached out and grabbed Jake's hand. The contact sent waves of blue light racing up both their arms. The crystal flowers around them burst into brilliant colors never seen before on Zrix. "Remember this," she whispered urgently. "The royal ball is in 3 days. My sister will try to expose us, but it's also our chance to show everyone the truth." She let go of his hand, the glow fading slowly. "And Jake, if we fail, it won't just mean our deaths. It will mean the end of my entire species." She turned and walked away, her robe shimmering in the moonlight. The transformed crystal flowers marked her path like a trail of starfire. Jake stayed in the garden for a long time, watching the colors fade. On a branch above, the drone bird kept watching. In the shadows, he caught glimpses of black armor moving, and in his mind, he saw those thousands of pods holding the future of an entire species. The game they were playing wasn't just dangerous anymore. It was everything. Near the garden entrance, a single crystal flower suddenly turned black and crumbled to dust, a sign of what would happen to all of Zrix if they failed. The plot thickens. The day before the royal ball, Jake found himself in the strangest place yet, the Zrix Temple of Ancient Memories. The circular room rose hundreds of feet high, its walls covered in flowing liquid metal that formed moving pictures. Princess Vera had smuggled him in through a secret entrance, despite the risk. "Watch," she said, touching the liquid metal wall. The silver surface rippled, and images began to form. "This is what our people used to be." Jake gasped. The images showed Zrix from 1,000 years ago. Unlike the stern, controlled aliens he knew, these Zrix danced, laughed, and touched freely. Their silver skin glowed with countless colors as they expressed emotions. Children were born naturally, not in pods. It was a completely different world. "Everything changed when the great numbness came," Vera explained. "But that's not the real truth. Look at this." She touched another part of the wall. New images appeared, ancient Zrix scientists in a laboratory. They worked with strange machines that pulsed with dark energy. "Our ancestors did this to themselves," Vera said bitterly. "They thought removing physical sensation would make us perfect beings of pure logic. Instead, they cursed us." A noise echoed through the temple. Vera quickly pulled Jake behind a pillar as two priests walked past, their crystal staffs clicking on the floor. When they were gone, she continued in a whisper, "But there's more. The royal doctor made a discovery about your touch." She pulled out a small holographic projector. It showed microscopic images of cells. "When you touch us, your bioelectric field jumpstarts our dormant nerve endings. It's like waking up parts of us that have been asleep for centuries." Jake watched the images of cells lighting up with blue energy. "Is that why the Queen?" "Yes, but it's also why you're in danger." Vira's eyes darted around nervously. "There's a group called the Eternal Silence. They believe sensation is a curse. They've killed to keep our people numb before. And now." She stopped as the liquid metal walls suddenly turned black. Warning bells began to ring throughout the temple. "They know we're here," Vera hissed. "Run." They sprinted through dark corridors as shadows moved behind them. Jake glimpsed figures in black robes, their faces covered in masks made of the same liquid metal as the temple walls. The Eternal Silence. They reached a window overlooking a crystal bridge. "Jump." Vera pushed Jake onto the bridge. "Get to the ball tomorrow. My sister will try to use it to expose you. But it's also your chance. Make everyone see the truth." "What about you?" Vira smiled sadly. "I'll leave them away." Besides, she touched his hand briefly, and her skin glowed blue. "Now I know what it feels like. What we lost. What we could have again." She turned and ran back into the temple as the masked figures approached. Jake watched in horror as the liquid metal walls seemed to reach out for her with silver tentacles. He ran across the crystal bridge as shouts and strange energy blasts erupted behind him. When he reached his quarters, he found an invitation had been slipped under his door. The royal ball would be held in a grand crystal spire, the highest tower in the city. But there was something else too. A small crystal flower, completely black, with a note. "The silence must be maintained." Jake looked out his window at the grand crystal spire, piercing the pink sky like a needle of light. Tomorrow, everything would change. Either the Zrix would wake up from their 1,000-year numbness, or the Eternal Silence would win. And somewhere in the temple, Princess Vera was facing the consequences of helping him discover the truth. The crystal flower on his desk crumbled to black dust, just as the one in the garden had. But this time, hidden in the dust, was a tiny data chip. On it, Jake found a single file, the original plans for the machines that had cursed the Zrix people. Now he had a choice: help restore sensation to an entire species, or let them remain in their comfortable numbness. And he had to decide before the ball tomorrow night. Rebellion rising. The grand crystal spire sparkled like a frozen flame against the night sky. Thousands of floating lights drifted around its peak, where the royal ball was about to begin. Jake adjusted his special diplomatic suit, designed to match Zrix's formal wear, with strips of light-responsive crystal woven into black fabric. But his mind wasn't on the party. Hidden in his suit collar was the data chip from the black crystal flower, containing the plans that had cursed the Zrix. And in his pocket was a small device he'd created using those plans, modified with the royal doctor's help. If it worked, it could reverse the great numbness. If it failed, welcome, Ambassador Chen. A smooth voice interrupted his thoughts. A Zrix noble stood before him, face markings identifying him as Lord Kha'Zix of the High Council. Quite a night for a celebration, isn't it? Jake noticed the Lord's eyes flick to the guards positioned around the room. Some wore traditional silver armor, but others wore the black armor of Princess Vera's spies. And in the shadows, barely visible, figures in liquid metal masks watched. The eternal silence. Indeed, my lord, Jake replied carefully. Though I haven't seen Princess Vera tonight. Lord Kha'Zix's silver face showed no emotion, but the crystal decorations on his robe flickered darkly. Ah yes, sadly, the princess is indisposed. Too much exposure to dangerous ideas. Before Jake could respond, trumpets sounded. Queen Xayara made her entrance, and the crowd gasped. Instead of her usual crystal dress, she wore a robe that seemed made of living light, shifting colors with every movement. But more shocking were the blue glowing marks visible on her silver skin, exactly where Jake had touched her during their secret meetings. The queen's eyes met Jake's across the room. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. Lord Kha'Zix gripped Jake's arm. You see those marks? The queen has been corrupted by human touch. The High Council cannot allow. He stopped as the lights suddenly dimmed. On the central platform, Queen Xayara raised her hands. My people, she announced, her voice ringing through the spire. For too long we have lived in silence. In numbness, we called it perfection, but it was a curse. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The eternal silence figures moved closer to the walls. Watch, Xayara commanded. She touched a crystal flower, and instead of just changing color, it began to sing. A clear, beautiful note that made the entire spire vibrate. Our ancestors stole our ability to feel, she continued. But tonight, she looked directly at Jake. Tonight, we have a chance to wake up. Chaos erupted. Lord Kha'Zix shouted treason. The black-armored guards clashed with the silver ones. The Eternal Silence members raised their hands, and liquid metal began pouring from the walls. But then another voice rang out. Familiar, but changed. Stop. Princess Vera stepped out of the shadows. Her silver skin was now laced with glowing blue lines, like a web of lightning. The liquid metal recoiled from her touch. The temple tried to silence me, she announced. Instead, it showed me everything. The truth in the liquid metal memories. And now, she touched the nearest wall. The liquid metal didn't consume her. It transformed, turning into a cascade of shifting images. The entire spire became a giant screen showing the history of the Zrix, their lost ability to feel, the lie of perfection, the dying children in the pods. Enough. Lord Kha'Zix pulled out a weapon, ancient technology that pulsed with dark energy. The silence must be maintained. Jake reached for the device in his pocket. The queen raised her glowing hands. Princess Vera's blue lightning crackled. And above them all, the twin moons of Zrix aligned for the first time in 1,000 years, sending rainbow light streaming through the crystal spire. The light hit the crystal flowers, which began to sing in harmony, creating a symphony that made every Zrix in the room stop and stare in wonder. For the first time in centuries, they were feeling something together. Lord Kha'Zix fired his weapon. The dark energy beam shot toward the queen. Jake jumped forward with his device, and Princess Vera reached out with her lightning-laced hands. The three energies, dark, blue, and lightning, collided in the center of the room. And the crystal spire exploded with light, breaking tradition. The explosion of light changed everything. When it faded, the crystal spire's walls had transformed into something new. A living, breathing material that pulsed with rainbow energy, and every Zrix in the room was changed too. Their silver skin now rippled with waves of color showing their emotions, just like their ancestors in the temple memories. But Lord Kha'Zix wasn't finished. His dark energy weapon had merged with his arm, spreading black veins across his silver skin. "You don't understand," he snarled, his voice distorted. The numbness wasn't a curse, it was protection. He raised his transformed arm, and shadows poured out, forming into creatures made of living darkness. 1,000 years ago, we found something in deep space, something that fed on emotion. We had to shut down our feelings to survive. The shadow creatures attacked. Jake's modified device sparked in his hands, creating shields of blue light. Princess Vera's lightning formed a protective web around the innocent Zrix, who were overwhelmed by their newly awakened sensations. Queen Xaira stepped forward, her light-woven robe blazing. "You kept this secret. Let our people die in pods rather than face the truth. Better than being food for the emotion eaters." Lord Kha'Zix gestured, and the ceiling of the spire peeled away, revealing the night sky, and something massive moving in orbit above. A shape made of void-black tentacles, bigger than the city. Jake's mind raced. The device in his hands, based on the ancient plans, wasn't just for reversing the numbness. The royal doctor had discovered something in Jake's human DNA. Not just the ability to wake up Zrix's nerves, but a kind of emotional energy the shadow creatures couldn't consume. "Your Majesty," he called to Xaira. "The crystal flowers. They're not just decorations, are they? They're some kind of technology." The queen's eyes widened in understanding. She touched the nearest flower, and it began to sing again. But this time, the sound carried Jake's unique human energy signature. The shadow creatures recoiled. Princess Vera laughed suddenly. "The temple didn't just show me memories, it showed me this moment." Her lightning-laced hands touched the living walls. "The crystal spire isn't just a tower, it's a weapon." The walls of the spire began to sing in harmony with the flowers. Light shot upward, carrying the combined power of human emotion and Zrix's technology. The massive shape in orbit writhed. But Lord Kha'Zix wasn't done. The dark energy had consumed half his body now. "If we feel again, they'll devour us all." More shadow creatures poured from him. Then something unexpected happened. A young Zrix child, who had sneaked into the ball, walked up to a shadow creature. Instead of attacking, the child hugged it. Where they touched, the darkness transformed into twinkling lights. "They don't feed on all emotion," Jake realized. "Just the negative ones. Fear, hate, the things your ancestors thought would make you weak." The queen understood. She reached out and took Jake's hand. Where they touched, pure blue light spread outward in waves. "My people," she called out, "don't fight the shadows. Show them what they've never tasted before. Show them joy." All around the room, Zrix began touching the shadow creatures, transforming them with positive emotions. The massive shape above the city started to change, its dark tentacles becoming streams of starlight. Lord Kha'Zix screamed as his shadow army transformed. The dark energy weapon tried to consume him completely, but Princess Vera struck him with lightning. "Wake up," she shouted. "Feel something other than fear." The dark energy shattered, leaving Lord Kha'Zix collapsed but alive, his silver skin showing color for the first time, not black or blue, but a swirl of every shade, like an emotional rainbow. As the last shadows transformed, the crystal spire began to rebuild itself. But it was different now, no longer just crystal, but a combination of the old and new. Living walls that responded to emotion, singing flowers that protected instead of just decorated, and at its heart, a permanent reminder that feeling wasn't weakness. It was salvation. The massive creature above, now made of light, sent down a shower of twinkling energy that covered the city. Everywhere it touched, Zrix began to feel again. And in the pods deep below, the children started to glow with healthy blue light. But in the shadows of the spire, a single drop of dark energy remained, pulsing like a tiny heart. And in orbit, beyond where anyone could see, more void-black shapes were moving toward Zrix. The touch of change. Dawn broke over the crystal city of Zrix, But it wasn't the usual pink sunlight. 3 massive void ships had appeared in orbit, blocking out the sun with their dark tentacles. Below, the newly awakened Zrix people watched in terror as smaller shadow creatures rained from the sky. In the transformed crystal spire, Jake, Queen Sierra, and Princess Vera stood around a holographic map showing the invasion. The living walls pulsed with warning colors. "They're drawn to our emotions now," Vera said, her lightning-marked skin crackling. "We've become a beacon to them. But we found their weakness," Jake reminded them, holding up his modified device. "Love transforms them. Joy changes them. We just need to." An explosion rocked the spire. Through the windows, they saw something impossible. The drop of dark energy they'd missed was growing, forming into a twisted mirror version of Lord Kha'Zix, made entirely of living shadow. "You fools!" The Shadow Lord's voice echoed everywhere. "I am what Kha'Zix feared most, the first emotion eater to reach Zrix. We don't just feed on feelings." The creature grew larger, absorbing the fear of the city's people. "We become them." Queen Sierra's light-woven robe blazed as she stepped forward. "Then become this." She touched the living walls, and every crystal flower in the city began to sing. But this time, the song was different. Not just notes, but actual voices. The voices of ancient Zrix, preserved in the liquid metal memories of the temple. The Shadow Lord staggered as the song hit him. Jake's device picked up the frequency, amplifying it with his unique human emotional signature. Princess Vera added her lightning, creating a network of light throughout the city. But the void ships above sent down more shadows, and the Shadow Lord laughed. "Music cannot stop us. Fear will always be stronger than." "Then what?" A new voice rang out. Lord Kha'Zix himself stepped into the spire, his silver skin still swirling with every color of emotion. Behind him came the young child who had first transformed a shadow creature. And behind them, hundreds of Zrix children emerged from the underground pods, their bodies glowing with perfect blue light. They had been changed by the energy released in the spire, born with both the ancient Zrix ability to feel and the human resistance to emotion eaters. "Remember the prophecy." The young child stepped forward. "When silver turns to rainbow and shadows turn to light, the children of 2 worlds will set all souls right." Jake suddenly understood. He wasn't just here to help the Zrix feel again. Human DNA wasn't just compatible with Zrix biology. It was the key to their evolution. The Shadow Lord roared and attacked, but the children formed a circle, joining hands. Where they touched, networks of light spread through the streets, forming patterns like neural pathways, connecting every Zrix in the city. For the first time in 1,000 years, they felt as one people. The void ships sent down massive tentacles of darkness, but everywhere they touched, the connected Zrix transformed them with shared emotions. Joy, hope, love. The shadow creatures didn't just turn to light. They became part of the neural network, adding their ancient power to the Zrix collective. Queen Sierra took Jake's hand, their combined energy adding to the transformation. Princess Vera's lightning connected the ground to the sky. Lord Kha'Zix led the older generation in accepting change. The Shadow Lord screamed as the light reached him, but instead of destroying him, it revealed his true form, one of the first Zrix, from before the Great Numbness. He had become an emotion eater to survive the loss of feeling, trapped in darkness for 1,000 years. "Come home," the Queen said softly, reaching out to him. The former Shadow Lord looked at his people, not numb, not afraid, but transformed by the very emotions he had fed upon. He reached back. The moment they touched, the final transformation began. The crystal spire shot a beam of pure emotional energy into space, hitting the void ships. But instead of destroying them, it transformed them into massive crystal gardens floating in orbit, their dark tentacles becoming streams of starlight that connected them to the city below. The prophecy had come true, but not in the way anyone expected. The Zrix hadn't just regained their ability to feel, they had evolved into something new. a species that could transform negative emotions into positive energy, their cities alive with flowing light and song, their children born with the power to change darkness into stars. Jake looked at Queen Xyra, remembering their first touch that started everything. "Still going to make me suffer for touching you?" She smiled, her silver skin glowing with all the colors of emotion. "Every day," she said, taking his hand. "But now it's the good kind of suffering." Around them, crystal flowers bloomed in space, shadow creatures danced with children, and the ancient songs of the Zerix echoed between the stars. The age of numbness was over. The age of feeling had begun.